Devin, good morning. Well, good afternoon. We're just complaining about the timelines for both of us. But how are you? Devin
I'm doing
Marble.
well. Good morning to you. Good afternoon to me. Doing well. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks for having me.
you're not changing nappies at the moment, mate. Business and family, it's always a good mix.
Yeah, I'll be changing some nappies when my kids get back with my wife. They're off right now doing some errands.
Yeah, nice one. Do you want to give everyone a bit of an introduction to who you are and what you're doing at the minute, mate?
Yeah, sure. My name's Devin Marble, and I work for VR patients, and then I run Immersive Medical, which is like this independent, not-for-profit YouTube channel for people in nursing and paramedicine, and it just helps them become better nurses, better paramedics. And I work in VR. I talk about VR and sim, and I love it. And I'm excited at the potential impact that these immersive solutions have on what I see as something super important that we should all be paying attention to, which is our public health crisis of having a staffing shortage and the need to produce bigger, faster, stronger nurses sooner and quicker.
Yeah, in the VR industry, that gets rabbited out pretty often. You use the word impact. What impact do you see?
Oh, I see us, let's just say the industry, right? The industry of immersive simulation. I see us as a key fitting into the lock to solve part of the solution. I don't think there's going to be a silver bullet. The WHO says we're going to be a short 15 million home health aides, nurses, CNAs, like all of them in 7 years. And I've seen projections that over the next few years, we're only going to have an increase of about 500,000 at our current pace. But I see immersive technologies helping faculty, clinical educators do more of the clinical time in an immersive way that is accredited, that counts, right? It doesn't replace everything, but it allows them to produce a competent healthcare worker faster. And that's really important because even at today's rate, these nurses that come out of nursing school, not all nursing schools are created equal. There are different levels. Some of them only produce 50 students a cohort. Some of them are getting nurses out the door in droves. But when they arrive at the hospitals, I'm hearing challenges that they face. These nurses aren't ready. I have to tie them to a proctor for longer. This nurse has graduated. They have the certificate. I can't put them on the floor by themselves yet. That's a challenge. And I think that's where immersive solutions can help, because if they can hit that floor ready, that's a win. That gets us one step closer.
Yeah, that's a good point. We've been doing a bit of work with Ohio State and Steph, who's also a co-host of this podcast, who's not here today, but the work that they're doing is focused around practice readiness for new grads and understanding exactly how XR tech can focus on that. So that's a good point. In Australia, I don't know how it is in the US, we have these nurses or facilitators, they get called, who support new graduate nurses in the hospital. That's their job as an educator, is literally just to go around and help support new grads. Now, they get paid $100,000 a year. That's a lot of support just for practice ready nurses, right? Who have just finished their university degrees. So, the ability to save cash and resources around importing these new grads into the industry is fascinating, because if I worked in graphic design, I wouldn't get new grad support. If I was in another industry, I wouldn't be getting new grad support, because obviously the reality is you do your study and then you work. So why should nursing be different than that, right? So very, very fascinating. And I had this question the other day around VR adoption. I had a conversation with an entity who said, look, it's interesting, but it's just experimental. We really don't see adoption happening until 2025, 2026. What do you say to people when we see the Apple headset coming out, we see HTC, Meta, the hardware's exponentially becoming more accessible, ergonomically friendly, even though the price points aren't cheap. The access and the content are improving every 6 months. What's your thoughts around that?
Oh, what do I say to people? I say it's phenomenal. It's phenomenal for our industry. I've had a couple of people say, "Yeah, but our institution's not going to buy a $3,500 Apple headset for our students to do simulation." And I'm like, "Good, don't. That's crazy. Don't do that. You've got the MetaQuest headset right there for $400. It does the job, right?"
Yeah.
So then what's the value of having this Apple headset come out? And here's one example of some serious value I see. And now, Brad, you might be in a different position because you are neck deep in VR and this VR simulation world. But I'm going to take a stab and guess that. Let me ask you a question, Brad. Have you ever seen anybody at a coffee shop with a headset on?
So I lived in Korea for 4 months last year, and I stayed at the Hilton for a weekend with my wife when she came to visit. When we were in the foyer, the Pico team were downstairs getting ready for a metaverse event for BTS.
That
And there
doesn't count.
Yeah, I know.
I like it. Okay, so that's a perfect. That's exactly right. Right.
Yeah.
If you are not a part of the industry creation,
Yeah.
you're not wearing a headset in the wild.
Yeah.
Even here's another example. Have you ever seen someone, and I'm talking Joe Schmo consumer, with a
Yeah.
headset on an airplane? No.
No.
No, me neither. And we are chasing this industry. This is what the Apple headset's going to do. You're going to see someone at Starbucks wearing a headset one day. It's going to be a status symbol, and one day, very soon, it's going to be people are going to be amazed by it. People are going to walk over and they're going to go, "Hey, how does that work? Do you like it? What are you doing right now? What are you using it for?" And what's crazy is that person's going to be able to look at them in the eye and shake their hand without taking off the headset. Right? Because even though it's a VR headset, it's AR first. The pass through is first. So this is what this is going to do for our industry. We're having a hard time pushing a snowball over the hill of adoption. But that's because many of the people who should be and need to be adopting these solutions to make their educators bigger, faster, stronger have never seen this hardware before. They have never tangibly felt it. They've never seen it in the wild. So they're kind of purchasing these things on faith. And like, I'm being told I need VR. So this thing's supposed to help me. Let's get VR at our institution. Which one? How? Why? Ooh, this is starting to get scary. How do we use a grant for this? Oh, it's a software purchase as well. Oh man, that's harder. And all of this becomes these big challenges. But when Apple is going to tip this snowball over the hill and you're going to start to see it out in the wild, they're going to go, "Oh, I know what you're talking about. Oh, yeah, I've seen one of those." It won't be the exact same thing, right? It's going to be the Apple headset. They're going to think they're all the same, but that's okay. It's going to be more common. It's going to be more accepted. It's going to be more something that they're willing and ready to embrace. That's going to be huge for our industry.
Yeah, well, for a person that's just done a sequence of 24 hours travel over the last 6 weeks, the idea of getting onto a plane and zoning out with some headphones into another reality is, that I could definitely understand why the partnership with Disney and ESPN for the headset.
100%.
But yeah, that is fascinating. I like the way that you say out in the wild as well. So how's VR patients going? How did you get there? If you want to give everyone a bit of a contextual backup to what role it is you have at VR patients and what sort of career history got you to that point.
Sure. Well, my role at VR patients, I'm like Mr. Content Development, Mr. Communication to the consumer, Mr. Marketing material. I kind of wear a lot of hats to try to convey the ease of use or the value proposition and, help with strategic partnerships. But it's a startup. You got to wear a lot of hats at a startup. And so I'm proud to just be involved in making an impact in this industry. And I really, really am close to the mission and the value of VR patients, which is this goal of like creating an actual tool for the sim specialist that effectively is like ensuring the employment of the future of the simulation specialist. Right? Like today, they go to Society of Simulation and Healthcare, they get their 4 letters after their name, CHSOS, or you name it, and they become this certified simulation professional to use mannequins. And as the industry is shifting and changing, VR patients slots in as this tool that's very much like, it's almost like a mannequin, a programmable mannequin in virtual reality that has no plastic, no wires. And you can just, and then it'll talk to you, it'll train you, it'll teach you, it'll also do what you ask it to do, and you can change it. That is the tool of the future of the clinical educator and simulation specialist. One of the tools on the tool belt. That's why I like and love working for VR patients. How I got here, I started as a customer. I was a customer at my community college. I'm adjunct faculty still there in Southern Arizona,
Yeah.
and I was building out our VR studio. We needed a solution, and then of course the pandemic hit, and then we really, really needed a VR solution. But even before the pandemic hit, they wanted the acronym. The chancellor of the university or the community college
Yeah.
wanted the acronyms to be a high-tech institution, a center of excellence. So I was helping build this VR center of excellence. We needed something. When I found VR patients, it was the only solution that I saw as really fitting the need that we had, because no one knows our courses, our education, what our students need better than us at our institution. So we didn't want something that we needed to purchase someone else's idea of what simulations we needed that we couldn't make changes to. So that's where VR patients slot in for our need. And I started working with them so much, working with VR patients so much to implement at our college, that I started contributing to the company, ideas and content, and I started to get really involved and feeling a lot of fulfillment and joy out of my life. I was pre-med, Brad. I was this close, University of Louisville, and right before the pandemic, I canceled it and leaned into digital because I saw this incredible path, and I was really hopeful. And so then I started out with them, very small independent contractor for over almost 2 years, just pounding the pavement and creating value as much as I could and helping the customer understand. And I'm very pleased to be where I am today, a full member of the team.
Yeah, awesome. Pre-med, I did an exam to do medicine before I traveled to Europe. When was that? 16 years ago. And I'm so glad I didn't do it.
Oh man, I've got some colleagues of mine, even my cousin, he
Yeah.
had graduated from med school. It was actually his school that I was applying to. I had kind of like a back door in with the dean over there. But yeah, he was, when he first started as a resident emergency physician, there was some moments where he was like, "Ooh, did I make the right choice? Holy moly." And of course he
It's
became a doctor in a really tough time in our medical public health.
yeah, for sure. And you see TV presenters, sports stars, they get all the cash, but really, I have all the admiration for these docs that are working after hours and dealing with society. It's just amazing that, I would struggle. I would struggle to put that in over my career. But so okay, that's awesome. So taking an idea, and this is one thing, I'm doing an innovation fellowship at Ohio State. I'm also on the Australian Clinical Entrepreneur Program. So outside of just VR, I also have this particular interest in innovation. And generally, I think innovation is a hack. People talk about it, they put it in the mission statement, but they very
Right.
rarely have the mindset for, building an environment for ideas to clash. What it sounds to me, when you step away from pre-med and go into VR, what's the inspiration? Is the inspiration the impact, like you said? What's the drive to do something new and the mindset to take that on for you? Where do you see that as a building block of Devin the professional?
Well, part of it's definitely the technology. I love technology, right? I've got headsets, I've got monitors. I'm definitely going to be getting that Apple Vision Pro. I just got to, resell some toys that I don't need anymore. But I
Yeah.
love technology. And so there's this really fascinating cross section for me personally where I miss patient care. I miss, I miss saving people's lives. I'm a paramedic, right? That was scary, dangerous, and fun. and super rewarding, super challenging. And so this really fascinating cross section where I get to play with technology. And when people put it on and I help them and I put it on their face and they get to stand in front of a patient who's huffing and puffing and having a hard time breathing, and their mind explodes because they've never experienced anything like that, is really fulfilling. And then this idea that we have a need, and in order to solve the problem of fixing how our staffing shortages and how we feel, our emotional exhaustion at work. And I mean, think about CBTs, Brad. You know what I mean? Like we have at hospitals, they require CBTs to keep your training up and your solutions up and your continuing education. I mean, all of that stuff can be immersive instead of a death by PowerPoint. That reduces my emotional exhaustion because I know the industry I've walked into. I will constantly be learning and recertifying. But it would be great if those don't actually stress me out as well. It's already a stressful job. I
Yeah.
see immersive solutions being a part of that. And so I maybe that's like a holistic feeling of I'm in awe of the technology and the opportunity. I'm inspired by small pieces of impact and large pieces of impact, and that gets me really excited and motivated to like drive this home to something that really makes a difference.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm an intensive care nurse by trade. I'll never forget. People say, "Oh, working in business now, do you miss taking care of patients?" You just said, miss helping save people's lives. I think the thing that I miss, I never forget this guy. He bought flowers for his wife every fortnight. They'd been together for 53 years.
Wow.
I didn't save his life. I probably just gave him some meds. But that guy had such an impact on my life of the way he went about his life, his relationships, and just meeting people. The ability to connect with new people was to me the bright light of nursing. And my mindset is like, I would have never met you, right, if I hadn't have gone down this journey of, I have a business in Korea now, right? So like the journey that we take
Right.
and make mistakes, I think is the fascinating part of the industry where leaders carve their stone, right? Is being able to take the risks, go on with some kind of meaningful dedication to having an impact around that. And that's probably where we are in the industry at the moment with VR, would you say? These deans at nursing schools setting up centers of excellence is everybody wants to do good. Maybe it's a little bit of brand and marketing to try and have a point of differentiation in the market. But I think everybody does want to make Jenny the nurse better.
Right. Jenny the nurse. Yeah.
Jenny the nurse. Yeah. How do we make Jenny better? So after that little rant, when we think about Jenny and think about trying to provide a meaningful experience over her career, like you said, the data, I think from my experience, many people may not have used VR patients, but I'll give it a raw summary assessment. It's asynchronous simulation. You have a patient and you literally, as the attendee to the environment, you undertake an assessment, make decisions, and initiate treatment. And at the close of the scenario, you get a metric, a score around how you collectively went about your instance of care, right? So that instance of care score, can you talk to me a little bit about that and people about how VR, because I'm a believer on this, but how that data can drive excellence over time?
Yes, absolutely. So the description you gave is very accurate. I do want to give a little clarifier. Some people who may not be medical people, you think about skills. There's different skills in medicine. There are the physical skill of poking someone's skin with a needle, and then there's the clinical decision-making skill. What am I going to do next and why? And so VR patients focuses on the what am I going to do next and why, not CPR or the needle and filling up bags and washing hands. And so that allows the product to slot into existing curriculum where there's still the need for in-person, hands-on, connecting the connecting the dots with the wise nurse leader who can help you with your physical skills, and connect the dots with why did you do that, and why did you treat that patient, and what was their outcome. And in VR, with the system, whether it's accessed on the computer through WebGL or whether it's accessed in the headset, everything that the student does is measured and tracked. So, for example, like you were saying, the student gets a score, and at the end of it, that grade is based on what the faculty member has put in as gradable. And almost everything in the system is gradable. The questions you ask the patient, the actions you do when you tell them to lay down or when you auscultate their lung sounds, when you initiate an IV and it appears on their arm, or you give a medication at that dose, like every single one of those things can be gradable. And so the student receives a little grade, and it's not a full debrief, right? It's on paper. It's like, here's how you did, and try again to do better.
Yep.
The faculty member on the other side gets a very detailed report of every single thing that they've said as a critical action, and they'll see a list and go, okay, wow. So these are the critical actions that the student did or did not complete, and then they can see every decision that the student has made. But because we're measuring it in a digital environment, and this digital environment is intended to mimic reality, that means that your decisions you make count as scoring a test question almost. If the test question is, what dose do I give if the patient has asthma and they're wheezing? The test answer is this dose with this med. Click, right? And so it almost operates like an LMS, that as the student is making decisions, those are being tracked as decisions and scored. And so the faculty member can see at 5 minutes and 2 seconds in, you gave this medication. When you gave that medication, these are the vitals that the patient was at in that moment. I can see that after you gave the medication, you asked the question, do you have allergies? Let's try again. And let's make sure you ask for allergies before you give medications. And there's those teachable debriefing moments that kind of need to happen in person, because the faculty member will draw that connection for the student with their detailed analysis report of everything they've done. And that in turn changes the way that the faculty member can submit for accreditation, because they just have so many detailed analytics that prove the students have reached competency, or that they have put them through a certain amount of clinical competency challenges.
Yeah, that's interesting. I don't know if you've ever met a lady called Yugi Han.
No, I have not.
Name? So she's a researcher at Stanford. I was on a panel. I did a body swaps webinar probably over a year ago now, maybe even 18 months. But she recently released a new paper. And on that paper, they talked about, I might be wrong on the topic, but the outcomes were that using VR for learning was great, immersion, sense of presence. But one of the key outtakes was that fundamentally the learning is embedded outside of the headset. So the experience can happen in the headset, but the pre-brief and the debrief is where you really embed the knowledge and question what they've learned in the content in the device. But what you just said is classic, in that you go to the immersive experience, you undertake that experience, and then you come out and challenge the ideas. We're not treating virtual reality like a library where you just walk in there, do all of your learning and walk out. It must be scaffolded and linked in multiple moments in the classroom. So to me, that's valuable. Some applications seek to have all of the learning happen in the headset, so it's completely asynchronous and not bound to anything, which I think is a risk. So having the ability to track that data with the instructor in the real world is fantastic. Yugi Han, I'll flick you her details after this. She's good to follow because her outputs from her studies are really interesting.
You just brought something up that I think is super important, because VR is so new, and particularly healthcare VR simulation, that when you look at the list of all of the offerings out there, they're kind of all put in the same category, right? They're all like, well, that's VR simulation training. We're not ready for that because we're afraid that's going to take over our job, or it's going to replace me. You hear stories about nurses going, okay, so wait a minute, you're telling me that this immersive solution, it will educate the student, it will tell them what they're about to walk into, it will show them a patient, then they will treat that patient, and then they will get a score, and then it will debrief them. Boy, that sounds a lot like my job. And I think that if I could help people understand that there really is a significant difference in all of these platforms, and some of them they require one-to-one relationship with the proctor, which makes a challenge for scale. But then they do that simulation does almost every single one of those pieces of the puzzle. And then there are other sims like VR Patients, where when we say asynchronous, it means that your students can can be home performing clinical simulations, but they really need to come back to class to connect the dots and be debriefed. It also provides an opportunity for the faculty member to allow the students to really iterate at home in a like non-destructive environment. It's okay if you are doing poorly, fail often and fail fast. That startup mentality now applied to healthcare is extremely powerful, because when they come in, I would just love to see the day that these students come in to talk to their faculty, to do an actual simulation day in class or connect something in a lecture, and they've seen 300 patients. That is a whole different student. And those patients didn't teach them everything that they need to know about nursing. It was just an iterative environment to get better.
Yeah, I think, that reproducibility, the practice element of the conversation is where, the industry is just so ripe for that at the moment, post-COVID. And, I know of quite a few nurses that are sort of 60, borderline retiring, working in emergency departments, and, they request 2 weeks annual leave, and, they're not allowed to go on holidays, right? Because they're short-staffed. So these people are like, well, I'm just going to retire. And, this current state is just only going to get worse. I'm sure it's the same in the US, but most nurses are over the age of 40. So as these nurses start to retire and with an aged workforce, we're just going to be more and more short. So driving that engagement and that ability to educate people about what support is out there and what technology can support them. AI is just another classic example of how distant nursing feels from technology, right? Like healthcare, understanding how machine learning can impact nursing is complex, when really it's fundamentally going to change society. So, I think it's a fascinating journey to look at digital tech and how nursing embraces that over time. But so what's your thoughts the next 24 months?
So much is going to happen.
Yeah. So we've already talked about device adoption. So that's sort of accessibility. We've talked about market growth with the Apple headset. Application expansion. So looking at what apps will be able to do. You just sort of did a bit of a broad comparison to sort of VR simulation is a big banner, right? But there's a lot of players in the field. And if I was a sim tech at a university, knowing what I know, I would probably be engaging, 3 different VR sim apps because they have 3 different use cases, right? But the industry's not there yet because sim techs have just like, I've got VR and put it under one big banner, right? And companies like mine, like Bundle of Rays, we make curriculum. So realistically, if you're at a university, you could be using 10, 12 different forms of virtual reality or immersive tech within your curriculum across the 3 years. So there's a lot of room to wiggle there. But what do you think in 24 months, maybe looking at application capabilities and this sort of enhanced immersion of the content? What do you think is going to happen in that space?
I wish I could say that the consumer side of this industry, all of the educational institutions and agencies and hospitals in 2 years are going to be like fully embraced and they're all going to have some form of VR at their location. I don't think that's going to be the case. I think it's going to take longer than that. But I do think it will become easier to adopt it. And part of that might actually end up starting at the grant level, where grants can start to include this idea of an immersive solution that is separate from like a software training line item. As far as like applications and feasibility, I think that there's going to be some more applications out there that will use augmented reality and allow like a overlay of a three-dimensional patient onto a mannequin or some sort of blending of that type of thing. And institutions will make their choices, right? They may start with 5 or 10, maybe even like you said, 12 applications, but that'll get whittled down. You know what I mean? They'll probably prepay for 1 to 3 years with each application to get it as not monthly. And then when they do that, 2 years will go by, even a year will go by, and they'll have decisions made about, wow, we didn't even open that application. We didn't hardly use it. So perhaps we're going to offload that one because we were able to produce competent, healthcare workers without it. And then it'll get whittled down. And I bet in the next 5 to 7 years, we're going to see this industry have a top like 4 or 5 players. And I think Body Swaps is going to be one of those. I just think those soft skills are so strong, and I love that platform. It's a wonderful platform. I think Bundles of Rays has got a home at the seat at that table as well, because curriculum is huge. VR Patients is not intending to replace or even build curriculum. We're trying to provide a tool that slots into everyone's curriculum, right? Like if you consider every single clinical educator out there a chef, a gourmet chef, well, then we provide you with the ingredients and the tools, and we teach you how to build cook any meal. But they've all got restaurants. They all have to cook meals, right? And those meals have to be in a menu and a curriculum and be in order for people so they understand what they're getting into and how to get out the door nice and full and happy.
Yeah, I think I don't disagree where you're at. I do think the Apple integration, headsets in the wild, what level of adoption influence that will have, that really is the only left field piece, is that if Apple quickly release another headset 6 months or 9 months after the Vision Pro that's cheaper, smaller, etc., that could accelerate everything. One of the things I'm really interested in is the data. I think if you're a university and
right,
something like retinal tracking, maybe in 6 months there's an application that's relatively affordable that can sort of allocate hotspots to retinal tracking where you can objectively track Jenny's performance over the year. I could see that being a fundamental shift where, the research allocates the fact that Jenny 100% trains faster with immersive tech, then that would just be fundamental that every university then would have to use VR for nursing training. And I think in the future that will come. And that will be a huge step change because it'll be best practice. And that'll be a very interesting step. So therefore, retinal tracking or some kind of biometric data tracking, I think, measuring stress. So if you're in VR patients and you've got someone that's got chest pain and the clock's ticking and they become hypoxic, being able to measure somebody's stress during those procedures and understanding how their competence relates to their stress, that fundamentally would make a significant industry shift, right? So, and then obviously Fidelity, like on the new Apple release, I think Elsevier, the publishing company, have got an AR application, which is an anatomical, there's a heart that comes apart.
Some anatomy. Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, but I just can't see, with a $4,000 headset plus software cost that nursing schools are going to be using that in the next 3 years,
No.
So, no.
It's going to be for business people. It's going to be for people at work looking for productivity.
Yeah, 100%. Or like you said, on airplanes or bus stops, sitting back, waiting for the train to come in. All right, man. Well, we're getting there. So outside of that, what if you had some advice for someone? I think about when I started my business, and my wife says this all the time. She can't remember why she came to the bank with me to get the loan to make the idea to start the business, right? So, she's like, how did I ever let you do that? And your story is a little bit similar. You're going to do PreMed and then you just decided to chase this sort of passion piece, right? So I call it walking into the dark. You know, there's this huge level of uncertainty that is in front of us. How do we inspire people to make choices to do those changes? Because I think there's a lot of nurses out there who have good ideas, and the system can beat them down a fair bit. You know, the system is there sometimes for not for them to have a good idea. You know, it's for the executives to have the idea. But a lot of nurses do have good ideas. What's your advice on how to chase that?
How to chase a good idea?
Yeah.
You know, it's interesting. I was actually just reading and watching some videos about this very same topic. So a lot of the things I'm going to tell you right now, they're not necessarily my own. These are from, people like Steve Jobs and Jeff Bezos and the
Yep.
impact theory guys and Andrew Bustamante. But I think advice for walking into the dark, is that what you called it?
Yeah.
It has to come with this level of humility and an understanding that if you measure your success based only on the outcome and not the journey, then you are setting yourself up to be disappointed because 80% of people who try something new and entrepreneurial fail. And it's actually okay, right? Jeff Bezos says we have had thousands of failed experiments, but one successful experiments, which he was using the example of Amazon Prime, it paid for those other failed experiments 1,000 times over. And so the advice that I would give is to make sure that what you're doing is providing an impact for someone outside of yourself, and you get fulfillment out of that, and that you're receiving fulfillment out of the journey and its trials and tribulations. And if you're getting fulfillment out of the journey, then when you get to the end of it, whatever that looks like, you'll be able to look back and say, well, I'm proud of that. I'm glad that I went for this. And I really did. I left it all out on the line. I gave everything I could. And there's a great interview on the Impact Theory channel that has Andrew Bustamante that talks a little bit more about that type of idea. But it really rang true for me, and I think that that's important for people to take into consideration if they're gonna endeavor in something. And Steve Jobs said something, which was when he was early on with the Apple computer, back when it was still gray plastic with a rainbow apple. And they were talking about, why go down this path? Like, why do this? What are we doing here? You're building an expensive computer and people aren't ready for a $3,000 computer. And he said, he gave this analogy of the most efficient animals in the studies that were done. And the condor was listed as the #1 most energy efficient animal in the world. And humans were way down at like 3rd place as far as like efficiency in utilizing their energy and movement and going forward in life. But you give a human a bicycle and they are 10 times more efficient than the condor. And so if what you're doing in this dark road is building a bicycle for humans, you are on a worthwhile path because you're going to make people more efficient and you're going to make people better versions of themselves. And that is something that will impact the world and yourself positively, whether you land amongst the stars or on the star.
Yeah, nice. You're so positive.
I feel good.
Yeah.
These are good times, man. Can you
Being a
imagine
founder, you just sort of saying, enjoy the ride. I'm sitting here going, holy shit, this ride is so painful. No, I'm only kidding.
Oh, yeah, man. What did I watched this other video of another dad, because you and I both have toddlers, right? And this dad was like, just want to say to all the dads out there that, it's really hard with your kids and you're not getting sleep. And I just want to let you know that it's also going to be really hard tonight and you're also not going to get sleep tomorrow. So get over it. That was it. And I was like, thanks for the reminder. It's very much like business, right? It's like, man, I am burning the candle, but just make sure you're enjoying burning the candle.
Yeah. I think find the moments is what I would say. All right, man. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us. I'm sure we'll see you around the industry here and there. And good luck with it's your little boy, isn't it? You got a boy?
I got 2 boys, a 2 and a 4-year-old. Yeah, they're insane.
yeah, me too. I got a boy and a girl, but four 4 and 3. So yeah, we're going to go back and probably have a sleep and get on with life. But appreciate it, man. It's been great to chat.
Thanks for having me on. We'll talk soon.
Yeah, no worries. All right. Thanks, Devin.